is almost as exciting as you guys were talking about, but not quite. So tonight's presentation is kind of a carryover from what we had discussed during the state clinic. This is something that was requested by a number of officials after the state clinic, and that was the designated hitter. And that is apparently because this is not an easy rule. It's a little bit complex. So we'd like to thank Jay Cousins and Tom Litchfield, who have volunteered to do this presentation this evening. They have asked that instead of asking questions throughout the presentation, that you hold your questions, get a piece of paper, jot them down, and they will field those at the end. And the reason for that is your question might get answered as subsequent slides so that you don't get ahead of the presentation. You can just jot those down, and then we'll let everybody ask any questions that they want, except for whatever it was that you guys were talking about before we got on the presentation. So I'm gonna hop over to their computer real quick and get them set up. Give me just a second, and then we'll get underway. All right. Okay.
All right. Hello, guys and girls. This is Jay Cousins. Tom and I are here. We're going to try to decipher this designated hitter, this new player DH that got started in 2020. Hey, by the way, is everybody able to hear me? Okay. Oh, excellent. Good. I didn't hear anything, but that's okay. Hey, did we get some?
Yes, we did, Jay.
Christina, are you nodding? Yes, you can hear us? All right, yes.
Okay, just checking the audio. We just want to make sure everything's rolling okay. So, hey, so for 2020, obviously the NFHS added a new designated hitter rule. So there's 3 different kind of lineups you can have now. There's going to be that basic 9, there's going to be the traditional DH, and then they added this new one called a player DH. So we're going to go through this real quick, and Dan already asked you not to come up with any questions during the presentation. Let's just get through it real quick, and then we can take questions at the end, and hopefully we can shed some light on this thing, because I mean it's basically pretty straightforward, this player DH, but there's some substitution things going on in it that we're going to be talking about later that could get a little bit complicated, especially for like newer umpires, first-year umpires, second, even third-year umpires. Hey, I'm a 30-year umpire. I get confused about some of this stuff too. But hey, we're going to try to make some sense of this. But hey, let's talk about why they did it. I mean, they wanted to contribute to offense. Obviously, they want to give some extra players some additional playing time. It's all about the offense, and it's also to strategize. So coaches can strategize, getting some more players off the bench and getting a bat in their hand and still play defense as well. So, but it allows that starting DH to also be a starting defensive player. So keep that in mind. I mean, it wasn't that way. The traditional DH is not that way. This, however, is. And so you're going to end up, and we're going to talk about this later, bounce from a 9-man to a 10-man lineup on this new player DH. Also, with pitch count restrictions, with the pitchers that have been sort of in gear for the last couple of years, a lot of times these pitchers will reach the pitch count, and this will allow the pitcher to continue hitting and switch the pitcher. So that's really kind of the basics on why they did this. And so, but there's also some really basic concepts here. I think we're going to go down to. Let's go down to starts with the rule. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. We're just going to head through. Let's see.
We have to.
All right. We're going to. Okay. So basically, here's rule 3.14. This is the new one. This is the new, or is this the traditional? This is the beginning. The traditional DH?
Yes.
Yeah. So a hitter could be designated for any one starting player. We all know that. We've been working with that for a lot of years. In high school, obviously you can run anybody as a DH. You don't have to lock it into the pitcher like the NCAA or the MLB. So in all subsequent subs for that player. you have to obviously, the skipper has to tell you about this right at the beginning of the game. If the lineups are submitted and he comes at you an inning later, say, hey, I want to put in a DH. There's no way you're going to be able to allow that to happen. Okay, so it's got to be selected prior to the game. So he's going to submit either a 9-man, he's going to submit a traditional DH, or he's going to submit this new player DH thing. So, and I don't know. I'm not sure how often it's going to happen. I mean, last year I did maybe 6 games before it got shut down. I don't think a single game I had that new player DH thing going on. So, and I don't know if anybody else was the same way, but I don't know. I didn't have to deal with it. I was ready for it, but I didn't have to deal with it. And I think they were just as intimidated as anybody else, with that, starting with that rule. But so if it's not declared part of the game, no DH for the game, obviously. A pinch hitter or pinch runner for the DH becomes the DH. The starting DH may re-enter as the DH. We all know this. This is all pretty basic stuff. And then the DH and the player for whom he's batting are locked into a single position in the batting order. Okay, so no multiple subs to alter the batting order. This is 3.14a. The DH may be the 10th starter for any defensive player. And then here's a couple things where with their DH is terminated for the game if the player for whom the DH batted pinch hits or pinch runs for the DH. So just remember that. Keep that in your head at all times. DH or any previous DH plays, or the DH or any previous DH plays any defensive position. Okay, and that'll end the DH in those situations. All right, so here we go with the new one. So, hey, we were just talking about the traditional DH just then. Now we're going to go into 3.14b, which is that player DH. All right, so the starting DH may be a starting defensive player. Okay, so the defensive player may be substituted for any eligible sub, and then the original DH may re-enter one time. And then here's what you got to keep in mind, and here's what you got to lock into your head. The role of the DH is terminated if the sub or former sub for the defensive role subsequently participates on offense, either bats or runs. So the starting player DH is substituted for on offense. Okay, so those are two things that will eliminate will terminate the DH. And then no courtesy runner for the PDH allowed at all, right? So keep that in mind. You cannot courtesy run for the player DH in any circumstance. So let's move on. Hey, the lineup card management situation. You got to keep this simple. That lineup has to be simple. It's got to be organized, and it's got to be easy to translate. You could have a situation where a game is suspended or resumed at a later date, and another umpire could be using your lineup card at a later date. So it's just real important that you keep the lineup simple, organized, and extremely easy to translate. Okay, and we're gonna be going into some lineup. Tom's gonna be going into some lineup changes involving the player DH here in a few minutes. So so that'll be a little bit easier to absorb, just because you're going to be able to see lineups and you're going to be able to see some of the changes that you will be making on a lineup. And we're just making a suggestion of how to cross things off on our lineup cards here tonight. But you get whatever works for you, and whatever keeps it simple, whatever keeps it organized and easy to translate is going to work for us. So you don't have to do it the way we're doing it. But hey, so yeah, on that lineup that's submitted, look for that straight 9, look for the traditional DH or the player DH on the lineup card. At the plate meeting, look for it and identify it, and make sure it's they're very specific about what they're going to do. So there's some key activities that we want you to keep in mind at all times. I mean, always confirm the type of DH if it's used at the plate meeting. So the first thing you need to do is stare at that lineup card and find out what they're doing. Don't say something like, hey, Skip, you want to use this new player DH? I mean, I wouldn't do that. I mean, just let him try to figure that one out, but confirm it for sure at the beginning of the game, at the plate meeting, okay? So if it's a traditional DH, make sure you know for whom the DH is hitting. So when a player DH assumes the DH role, note that DH clearly, and we'll see that down the road in the presentation. Tom will deal with that with several lineup card changes. So and guys, know who has reentry rights. You got to know that. You gotta make sure that you know about the re-entry rule. Hey, there's some great casebook examples of subs re-entering on page 22 through 27 in the casebook, in the 2020 casebook. So hey, if you want to go to page 22 to 27, you're going to see some pretty excellent examples of subs re-entering, and they do actually use the player DH on that too. So and then also know the difference between an illegal sub and an unreported sub. That's a little bit different, but you got to know those things too. So, and obviously, like I said, the designated here is rule 3.1-4. So just go to your rule book. I'm guessing, I'm hoping everybody has read these things. Maybe you've gone into your 2020 simplified and illustrated book that was given to you guys. That's got some stuff on the DH. You can go to the nfhs.org website, and they've got 1,000 different examples of the player DH and what can happen there. So, and then, hey, if you're confused, if a skipper comes out and says, hey, I want to do this, or he asks you, a lot of times they'll say, hey, can I do this? If you get confused out there, hey, get with your partner. I mean, who knows? He might be an expert, he may not be, but I mean, you guys, together are going to need to figure this out. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one.
All right. We're rolling into some questions and answers here. And we're going to go through some of these. Hopefully this will answer some of your questions. If it doesn't, again, write it down. We'll catch up with them at the end. Starting with the first one, can someone substitute for the starting player DH as a sub? Well, they can substitute, but it eliminates the DH. So no one can enter, no sub can only enter the defensive role. If a sub ever hit, he can only enter on the defensive role. If a sub ever bats, the DH is eliminated for the remainder of the game. So you can't bring in, let's say, a guy's third baseman DH. You can't bring another person in to play third base and have that person assume the third baseman DH role. He is either a third baseman and the original player DH is for him, or becomes a straight 9 and he bats for himself. Next one, here's an example of a lineup change in the second inning. Another player bats for the player DH, thus ending the DH role. Is it possible for the starting player DH to re-enter? The answer is yes. It says, provided there has never been a sub on the defensive role, the player DH still has re-entry rights. So he came out of the game. Yes, he has re-entry rights to come back in, but because another player batted for him, he's no longer a player DH. The DH role is terminated for the remainder of the game, and the re-entry would be just a standard re-entry, and it would go to a straight 9 at that point. Next one, can someone substitute for the player DH if there's an injury? And of course you can substitute for them, but they do not continue as the player DH. So there's no provision to make an exception for an injury. So if an eligible sub replaces the player DH as a pinch hitter or pinch runner, the role of the DH is terminated and the player DH is removed from the game. An injury doesn't create an exception. Page 9 for you.
Okay, page 10, actually. So
Page 10.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, guys. So the next question is under the player DH rule. Can anyone else ever become the DH? And if you think about that, I'm sure you're coming up with your answers right now. So obviously, you know, the answer is no. Only the original player DH can be the DH. Any offensive subs terminate the DH role for the remainder of the game. And so I'm thinking maybe some of you were saying yes to that, but the actual answer is no. And once again, the original player DH could be the DH, but any offensive subs terminate the DH role for the remainder of the game. So it's really important to know when the player DH is, or the DH is terminated for the game. So you really got to lock onto that and absorb that closely. So next question is, can a player DH who starts as the pitcher be replaced as pitcher in the third inning, return to pitch in the third inning? So think about that. Think about that just for a second. So once again, can a player DH who starts as the pitcher be replaced as pitcher in the third inning? And then can he return to pitch in the third inning? Is that,
yep.
Am I reading that right? Yeah. So, hey, be thinking about that, and let's get that answer up here. We're going to do it in about a couple seconds here, but I'll give you guys a little bit of time to think about that. And here we go. And so the answer is yes. The player DH in high school does not restrict a player from returning to pitch, provided all the other pitching rules are met. So you got to know those things, got to know those pitching rules too. So, but the answer is yes on that the player DH in high school does not restrict a player from returning to pitch, provided all other pitching rules are met. Okay. All right. Okay, next question. Can a catcher or pitcher who's the player DH have a courtesy runner? And, you know, we talked about that at the state clinic back on December 18. It generated a lot of questions, but actually be thinking about that for a little bit. So, I mean, just think, can a catcher or pitcher who's the player DH have a courtesy runner? So be thinking about that, and we're going to give you that answer here in just about a couple seconds here. Think about it for another couple seconds. That's enough. Here we go. No, actually, the NFHS rule book is not specific about it. It's not super specific, but the NFHS has indicated that a player DH may not have a courtesy runner. Okay, so hey, if anybody can find in the NFH rule book about, you know, something that's really specific about this, but you know, the answer to the question is no to that. Okay, so so no courtesy runner for the player DH. Okay, and they're going to try that, by the way. They'll give it a shot, and you got to stop that. You got to know that, you know, if they're trying to do that, they cannot do that. So there's going to be a lot of learning curve going on with this player DH rule. But you know, I think if you read about it and you study it, and hopefully we're going to be helping out tonight with this, it'll be fine. So
hey Jay, can I just jump in here real quick about this particular question here?
All right. We've got, I'm bringing up most of the casebook plays for Rule 3.1.4. So if you want to refer to your casebook, you can do that. I've got a lineup card here. And the reason I did not go in order A, B, C, D, E on these case plays is I went with the simplest one to the most complex one. And we're going to get to the complex ones later on here. So this is one of the more simple changes. And from the case book, it's listed, you know, Kruger is our right fielder DH. They're batting in the 3 spot. And in the 5th inning, we're going to do a substitution. We're going to bring in another right fielder. And so Brodell is going to go in at right field. And so we pencil him in there in the lineup card. And we put him in as the right fielder. We got to cross him off at the bottom of the lineup card, but we also have to take Kruger out of the right field position on the lineup card. So this is an acceptable, it's an acceptable move. It's legal. And now what we have is we started out with 9 players in the lineup. We now have 10 players in the lineup, but the 3rd spot in the batting order is still occupied by Kruger. Brodell does not bat. Okay, so that's a relatively simple substitution under this player DH rule. That's kind of like the the very basics. So we'll, again, this is kind of how I would have my lineup card, not exactly, but on the simple changes where you're making just one change, it can be illustrated like this. On the more complex ones, I'll show you an alternate method for the lineup card, but it'll be spelled out on the one side here. The next one is casebook situation I. So we've got a player DH, Colgate, batting in the number 5 spot in the batting order. In the 4th inning, we're going to have a substitution, and what's going to happen is because Colgate is pitching, we're going to substitute a new pitcher in here. So we're going to put Montalvo in to pitch. So he's in as the pitcher. We cross him off. He's no longer an eligible sub, and we take Colgate off the pitcher, but he's still going to be the designated hitter. So the next substitution, from the casebook, it says that in the 5th inning, Colgate sprains his ankle as he slides into second base with a double. Well, nice that he's hitting, but now we needed offensive substitution, so Colgate is going to get substituted for. And this one's a little interesting because when we bring a substitution in on offense, we take Colgate out, the substitute, and so now he's off of the lineup. We have to pencil Little in, who's going to replace Colgate on second base. But because Little comes into the game on offense for Colgate, Montalvo has to come out also. So we went from a 9-player lineup to begin the game to a 10-player lineup when Montalvo came in to pitch. But now Little comes in, and he's occupying the number 5 spot in the batting order. When they go back out on defense, he doesn't necessarily have to pitch, but obviously somebody does, and we'll keep track of that. And then I cross him off at the bottom of the lineup card, so I know what eligible substitutes we have left. Now, the next question, if Montalvo, who was a substitute, does not have re-entry rights, the coach could have placed him in to run in place of Colgate. We still would have had a 9-player lineup, but Montalvo would still be in to pitch. So there's a few different things that the coach could have done. Once he has placed Little in the lineup, Montalvo's out and done for the day. Colgate does still have re-entry eligibility, but because he was injured, it's, I don't know, maybe a little ice on the ankle. He'll be better in a little bit. But anyway, that is this one, a little more complex, but you can see how we started with 9, went to 10, and then we're back to 9, and now it's a straight 9 with no player DH. All right, here's our lineup. Next one, situation H. Out of the casebook, Dolan is listed as our second baseman DH, batting cleanup, and the coach wants to bring in somebody to bat for him. So we're going to bring in Tattleman to bat for Dolan, and he comes in. Dolan has come out of the game, and because it was an offensive substitution, we're now down to a straight 9. Okay, Dolan may re-enter the game because he was a starter, so he could re-enter as a defensive player. He could re-enter on offense, but he will not be a designated hitter. And when he re-enters, Tattleman will have to come out of the game.
And he's got to stay in the 4-hole.
And he's got to stay at the only spot that he can come back. If he comes back in the lineup as a re-entry, he re-enters in the same spot, and Tattleman would have to be the person to come out of the game. Okay, nice, neat lineup cards. We're able to read them, and it's relatively simple when you have a whole game and you have one lineup card change. Okay, here's what I do if Dolan re-enters the game. I'm going to circle him, cross out Tattleman, and then the other thing that I will do is put whatever position Dolan, he comes back in to play second base. Now he is just a straight second baseman, and he's batting for himself. And so that's how that's my method for annotation of a re-entry.
Right, and that's fine. And you know, I happen to use parentheses on mine, but I mean, hey guys, just come up with something that works for you. Come up with something that triggers your brain, that you've got you know, somebody coming into the game. It can be a circle, it could be parentheses, it could be, you know, red stars, whatever you use to trigger yourself. But you got to know these things, okay? You got to be able to figure that one out, okay? So just whatever works for you is fine. Hey, the circle's going to work for parentheses, work for me. I'm sure you guys all have your own ways of you know, identifying the person, the player who's eligible to re-enter.
And if you go on the NFHS website and look up the NFHS lineup card, there's actually a little box for the starters that you can check that says re-entry. The problem with that is I've been umpiring for 21 years and I have never seen one of those lineup cards other than on the NFHS website. I've never seen somebody actually use one. So
Sure, yeah.
maybe we get the NMOA to supply those to everybody. So we're looking at the same lineup card each team.
Yeah.
Okay, we go to another question here. When a pitcher DH has a sub in the defensive role and later returns in the defensive role, does that count as the re-entry? And it most certainly does. And I'll show you on my next lineup here. We're gonna do just that. But the player DH can come out as the defensive player for a substitute and remain as the DH. And then he can return to play defense and remain as the player DH once he's returned on defense, but he now has re-entered. So any subsequent substitute on offense will take him out of the game, but you could actually later put another substitute on defense. I'm going to show you that one here with this one. This one is not in your case book, but this will illustrate what I was just talking about there. So in this case, Davis is our first baseman and DH, batting in the fourth spot. In the second inning, Jackson comes in to play defense. So Jackson's in as the first baseman. Davis comes off of first base, and then my lineup card, I take Jackson off at the bottom, so he's the eligible sub. Now, in the third inning, Davis re-enters the game. So he re-enters here. So Jackson has to come out because Davis re-entered on defense. He's back at first base. Jackson's off of the field and done for the day. Now, another substitute could come in and play defense, and Davis could stay in the designated hitter role. This is where it gets a little interesting. Little comes in, and now Little's going to play first base. Davis no longer playing first base. Then we cross Little off at the bottom, and there's our substitute. So now the lineup card gets a little interesting because now we're going to bring in Ortiz. He's going to replace Davis, but because he replaces Davis, that makes it a straight 9. So he also replaces Little. And so now we have a straight 9-player lineup. Davis has come in the game and he came out of the game on defense. He re-entered, so he's now done. And there's Ortiz playing first base, and I've got Ortiz crossed off at the bottom. And you can see, if you're like me, I used to have a really sloppy lineup card, and I had one coach said it looked like a 4-year-old's coloring book by the time I got done with the game. I thought that was pretty funny, but it was true. And that was the part that was like, geez, I need to be able to read this. And if I ever had to pass it off to somebody else, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I was taught a technique on how to make a lineup card because on the illustration here, it was, I wrote in everybody's name. And if you're like me, I can't write as small as the coaches do on the original lineup card, especially when I don't have a hardback tablet or something to write on. So my method on this, and I'm going to show it to you here. I'm not sure if you're seeing the stray mark on there, but instead of actually writing the person's name in, the first substitute was Jackson, and I put an A by Jackson, and I put an A up in the substitute block on the lineup. The second substitute was Little, so I put a B next to Little, and I put a B up there. And so if I look at this lineup card, what I've got right now at the end, substitute C is currently in the game, and I can look down at the lineup card and figure out that the substitute list, that Ortiz is player C, and he's the one that's currently playing first base. And so this method, I can make 7 or 8 changes on a single line and still have a fairly neat lineup card. It only took me about 15 years as an umpire to learn how to do this and keep a neat lineup card. It doesn't work if substitutes aren't listed on your lineup card. Now in high school, they're supposed to be. And in fact, it says that they must be, but there's also no penalty for not listing this. So other than you got to make them put it on there. So there's a technique that I use to neaten up my lineup card. And when I make that first change on the lineup card, I never know if that's going to be the only change I make or if that's just the first of 15 changes. And again, my technique for someone that has re-entered the game is a circle. Some, like Jay mentioned, some sort of a annotation to indicate that the re-entry has occurred. The other thing that I didn't draw on here is once the re-entered person has come out of the game and is no longer eligible, I'll put an X through his name on the lineup card. And so therefore, then I will know that that starter no longer has re-entry eligibility, because if you look at it, the first one, there's a line through him the first time he comes off the field, and then a circle when he comes back. Okay, we got 2 more lineup cards to cover, and then we will open it up for questions and answers. I'm hoping that we're answering more questions than we're bringing up, but again, we'll entertain those in just a few minutes. So this is situation F out of the case book, and you can see that Sanders is our pitcher DH in this case. Our player DH is in fact the pitcher, and he's batting in the 3rd position. And in the 5th inning, McNeely is going to enter the game to pitch. So we take Sanders off of the pitch, and then we scratch McNeely down at the bottom. So now our 9-player lineup became a 10-player lineup. And this is going to be, if people use this, I think this is what you're going to see more often than not. Okay. So Sanders is continuing as the DH. And then the next substitute, we're going to bring Jackson in. He's going to replace McNeely. Now, at this point, Jackson is now the pitcher. Sanders is still the DH at this point. Take Jackson off at the bottom of the lineup card. And that can continue like this. Later in the game, Sanders comes in not to pitch, but he's going to play defense, and he's going to be the catcher. He has to replace Jackson. Jackson has to come out of the game because that's in this spot. So Jackson comes out. And then we've got, obviously, Gibson down here is listed as the catcher. He's going to be moved to pitcher. So the catcher went to pitch. Sanders, who was the starting pitcher, has now come in to catch. And so this is what your lineup cards looks like. And this is all legal. Everything that we have illustrated on this lineup card are legal substitutions. Sanders, who is now the catcher, is also the catcher DH at this point. Okay, so that was our casebook ones. I've got one more lineup card here, and bear with me on this one. I'll go through it because this is probably as complex a one as we're going to see, and I hope I never see this in an actual game. But here, this is all going to be, again, these are all legal substitutions. So we're starting with Davis as the pitcher DH, batting in the fourth spot. In the third inning, Lopez comes in to replace him as the pitcher. Davis remains the DH. In the fifth inning, Martinez bats for Davis. So Davis comes out, but if Martinez bats for Davis, Lopez has to come out, and we have Martinez in here. Okay, this move terminates the role of the DH for the remainder of the game. Now, Davis, who was a starter, can re-enter the game. If he does, he re-enters. Martinez has to come out. Davis, he didn't come in to pitch. He came in to play first base. And so now Chavez, the first baseman, is going to go to pitch. Okay, now later in the game, Nelson comes in to replace Davis on defense. And now we've got Davis, who was a starter. You can see my X through the name and the circle around it, which means he was a starter. He re-entered, and now he no longer has eligibility. But we have, again, a 9-player lineup, and we have multiple substitutions on this same line. Again, these were all legal substitutions. The last thing down here, you want to make sure you scratch off the name of the substitute that got used so they don't sneak him in someplace later. And then once again, here is my version of the lineup card using the ABC method for the substitutions. So the first substitute was Lopez. The second substitute was Martinez. And the third substitute was Nelson. And so Davis and A and B have been crossed out. So currently in the game is substitute C, which is Nelson, who's in the game playing first base. So there's some examples of lineup cards. What we're going to do now is we're going to open it up for questions. And we've got at least, well, we're going to stay here as long as we need to, I think, for questions. We don't really have a time limit on this. So I'm going to let Dana unmute things. And
1 second before we take some of the questions. I was just gonna reiterate just some basic things. I know, we've been through a lot, with the lineup cards, and I know some of you have got to be a little bit confused on this, but hopefully a lot of you saw this and it all made sense to you. You're going, okay, yeah, I understand where that X goes. I understand why we crossed this guy off, and understand why we crossed off the P on the P/DH. I mean, hoping you guys are understanding that fairly clearly. Like I said, we've been through a lot. But hey, some of the basic concepts on this thing are just keep in mind, no offensive sub for the DH without the loss of the DH. Okay, so that's a key concept for this whole thing. You just keep that in your mind at all times. Also keep this in mind: the player DH can re-enter on defense and keep the DH status. Okay, that's a basic rule about this new player DH. So the player DH can re-enter on defense and keep the DH status. That's what's keeping the offense going here. That's the whole purpose of this new rule, is to keep the offense going, score some more runs, get some kids involved in the game, and then remember we talked about no courtesy runner for the player DH. Okay, so hey guys, keep in mind there's managers out there who will exploit this. They're going to exploit it. You got to be ready for this. So all I'm saying is read about it. You got any questions? You can bounce them off us. I mean, we're completely prepared to answer. We pretty much have a pretty good idea of what's going on out there. But like I said, it's new, and I think there's some coaches, some skippers out there who might exploit this thing. So you just have to be ready to take that on, because and some of it's going to be just the skippers are going to be confused. They're going to ask you, hey, can I do this? Can I do that? You got to be prepared. Got to be prepared for that too. So that's all I'm saying is keep those basic concepts in mind on this player DH, and you should be okay.
Okay. One thing I want to bring up on this, on the questions, because if 5 people ask Dana the question all at once, we won't hear any of them. So if you use the raise your hand function and let Dana call on you, she will unmute you. We'll get the question, and then everybody will hear the question, and Jay and I will address it.
Okay, and hopefully you all can hear me from the other side of the computer. I don't want to turn on my volume because it's going to cause a ton of feedback. There are 4 of you with your hands raised. There's going to be a little bit of a pause in answering questions because of our volume situation here, so just bear with us. So I will start with Jaime Lopez, if you'd like to unmute.
Good evening. How's it going?
Go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening. How's it going, guys? Could you bring up the slide that you had earlier on the, it was the second to the last. It was with the 4 players. It dealt with Davis, Ortiz, and I can't remember the 2 other names of the individuals. It was before that one, I believe. And one more before that. Excellent. That's the one right there. Okay, my question is, Davis was the third baseman DH.
First baseman DH, yes.
Yeah, I'm correct. A first baseman DH. Jackson substituted for him on defense. Davis stayed DH. Then you decided to bring Little in to play first base. Davis still remained the DH. Got that. And then you mentioned Ortiz came in, but had Ortiz just come in to play defense, you could have left Davis as the DH, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Just confirming that, but
in my scenario, I said Ortiz came in. I think I said to bat for Davis, and that's what removed the DH from the game at that point. But yes, if he had come in to play defense, Davis would have remained the DH.
Fantastic. That's I was just making sure that we were good on that. In theory, you could have in a 7-inning game. In theory, you could have all 7 substitutes sub in that one area, and he still remained the DH.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, Jaime. Next up, John Casado. Go ahead and unmute.
All right, thank you, Dana. Hey, Tom and Jay. I don't know, for this situation, can you foresee this possibly happening towards the end of the season as teams bring up maybe JV players and add more players in their rosters? But my 2 main questions are this, and they have to deal with substitutes and dealing with players who are not reported in as substitutes. So my first question is this, is that if a coach mistakenly tries to put out a runner as a courtesy runner for the player DH, and according to the substitute rule, he goes into that base and touches the base, and we inform the coach, now you've lost the DH. Now he wants to retract that player, says, no, I don't want to do that. One, do we allow it since he's now legally a legal substitute since he touched the base? And then the second question is, as a batter who may come up and get into the box and let the player, the umpire know, hey, I'm taking this spot. And again, stepping in the box, telling the coach that he's lost a DH, and then the coach wants to kind of retract that.
Okay, I'll take this one. First situation, the runner goes onto the base until you put the ball in play. I would say he is not officially in the game because you have not accepted the substitution until that ball's in play. I would advise the coach, the way I would handle this is when the person comes into the game, I pull out my lineup card and see that he's going to run in place of the designated hitter, the player DH. I would inform the coach that this isn't a courtesy runner. This is a substitution. Confirm that that's what you want to do before I ever put the ball in play. Because if you didn't put the ball in, I mean, I'm trying not to confuse rule books here, but I believe the substitution is official if he's unreported and he takes his position and the ball is live. And so until the ball is live, he's not an official substitution. In the case of a batter coming up the bat and says, you know, I'm batting for number 16, and you pull your lineup, this is where I strongly recommend that you actually pull the lineup card out and make sure you know who the substitution is for before you accept the lineup change. And then if it is going to affect the designated hitter, I would confirm it with the coach before you put the ball in play there also.
And remember also, John, you know, we've always been taught not to take a whole lot of time with, you know, with lineup changes. I mean, you know, a batter comes in a traditional, you know, DH situation, batter will come up, they'll let you know what's going on. I know what's going on. I'm not going to, you know, take 5 minutes and get my lineup card out and make that change right there. I don't want to be on stage on that. However, with this player DH, you almost have to. There's no doubt about it. You got to get that lineup card out and you've got to confirm exactly what's going on. So take the time and you know, instead of you know, trying to keep the game going by not getting your lineup card out and dealing with it in the half inning, get it done right now, especially if it has to do with the player DH.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John. Next up, Brandon Wright, go ahead and unmute.
Hey Jay, this question is for you. I've been learning a lot from you as well for the last 2 years. I'm just a little confused about something here about the lineup card. A couple questions I have on that is, whenever you're doing the plate meeting as a home plate umpire and you're taken down as a player DH, do I mark that person as like PDH or do I mark him as a regular DH? How do I mark him? Secondly, when you sub the player DH, how do you how can you tell if it's an illegal substitution or not? And on top of that, when they're trying to courtesy run for the player DH, how do you tell them you can't do that?
All right, so your first question was identifying the player DH at the plate meeting. Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so you know, you're hoping that the skippers all have gone through the training on this too. I mean, there's trainings they have to go through on this too. They're trying to figure it out just like we are. And so you would hope that they would put a lineup card together just like what you're seeing. Are you seeing the lineup card right now, Brandon?
Yes, but
Okay.
I'm just seeing DH. I'm not seeing player DH next to the DH.
Right, but but what this says though is Davis is in the four. Do you see Davis in the 4 spot? And do you see
Yeah.
them? Do you see the 3 and then the / DH?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to tell you that you now it doesn't have to be P on this unless he's a pitcher.
Okay.
So
Okay.
all right.
I thought the P meant player DH.
Well, no, it does. It does mean that. But so what we're identifying here with Davis is that he's playing the third. He's playing first base. He's the first baseman,
Okay.
DH, which translates to the PDH, okay, or the player DH.
Okay,
Excuse me.
so I can put first baseman DH on next to his DH, right? Rather than putting 3 DH.
You could do that. You could do that if that
Okay.
if that helps you identify exactly what's going on there. And I mean,
It does.
if you want to go, okay, so if he's a center fielder, instead of saying, you know, 8, you can go CF on that, CF / DH.
Okay.
Okay, so I
Okay.
mean, this just identifies the number of the, you know, position players. So I mean, you know, obviously the left fielder would be 7, then, you know, center fielder would be 8, and then 9 on the right field side. So I mean, whatever helps you keep track of what's going on there. If you want to go CF on that, or RF or LF or SS for
CDH,
shortstop.
CDH for catcher.
What's that now?
CDH for catcher, DH, something
Absolutely,
like
yeah.
that.
You could absolutely do that, Brandon.
Okay,
If that keeps it simple for you, then by all means do that.
that's what it'll do. 'Cause
Yeah, no, that's
I
fine.
can't keep track of numbers well.
You know, as a matter of fact, Ben, I think I'll be doing the same thing. So, you know, if we work together,
Okay.
we're going to be doing it. You know, like if we work a double header together, we're both going to be doing it the same.
Yeah.
way. So, so
Okay.
that's so that'll work just fine. Yeah. What, like I said, Brandon, whatever, anybody else in the room also, you know, whatever keeps it simple for you. If you want to put CF or RFLF on there, then that's fine. But it's got to be /DH so that you know that it's the new player DH, you know, rule. Okay, or provision, I should say. Yeah. So, hey, your second question was what?
If I can remember, I think it was whenever you have the courtesy runner, and then how do you tell that coach you can't courtesy run for a pitcher? And then my last question was, how can you tell if that substitution for the DH is an illegal substitution?
Yeah, so on the courtesy runner situation, he's gonna, you know, usually, you know, the skipper will come out and say, hey, time, got a courtesy runner, right? And so, you know, as the home plate umpire, that you're dealing with a player DH right now, right? Okay, you know that.
Yeah.
You've got to know this.
Yeah.
That's when you're going to have to step in and say, hey, that is the player DH, and you are not allowed to courtesy run for that player DH. Okay.
So would it be appropriate for the base umpire to carry a lineup card with him too?
No, I don't think so. I don't think base umpires should, you know, carry lineup cards. You know, it's the same.
Because I feel like it would be helpful for me if I carried the lineup card on my pocket, just so I know if they're trying to do that.
Well, no, but so it's going to be the plate umpire's responsibility to catch this. Okay, so you're going to be the supervisor out there as the plate guy. You're going to be the crew chief out there. So hey, part of your responsibility is the lineup card. I would not suggest you have a lineup card in your pocket, because if the skipper gets wind of that, he's going to go out to you and say, hey, get your lineup card out real quick. I want to clarify something. And if you can't do it, you're shoving your plate under the bus on that. Okay, so I wouldn't suggest that, Brandon. Just like I wouldn't suggest anybody carrying an indicator out there as a base guy, but that's just me.
Yeah.
And then your third question
was illegal substitution. Whenever you're subbing the player DH out, how can you tell if they're getting an illegal substitution?
Well, you've got to keep track of what's going on out there. I mean, skipper comes out and says, "Hey, I'm changing my first baseman to, you know, or my center fielder is now going to DH for my first baseman." Okay, you can do that all day long. Okay, you can switch out that left side of that. You know that, you know where it's. Do you see Davis? Do you see number 3/DH there?
Yeah.
So all day long, you can change that to the left of that DH. Change it all day long. Nothing's going to happen. Okay, it's going to.
So if Davis is an illegal substitution, how do I enforce that if he is indeed an illegal substitution when he subs in? Let's just say that. How do I enforce what do I do to the coach? What do I do to the player if he comes in as an illegal substitution?
Well, you enforce the penalty for an illegal substitution.
So is that an ejection?
No, it's not an ejection. If the player is an illegal substitute and it occurs on offense, then it becomes an out and he's removed from the game, and then he's restricted to the dugout for the duration of the game.
Okay.
But there's no substitute, or there's no ejection or suspension or anything for that. And again, you generally as an umpire, if you keep track and know who the eligible substitutes are, you can, you know, if the substitute is reported to you, then, and you don't accept the substitute because they were not eligible to come into the game, you can prevent an illegal substitution. Remember that an illegal substitute is one who enters the game without eligibility to do so. They may do it, the time you're going to do it and most see it is an unreported situation. where they wind up on base someplace and they didn't have eligibility to do so. All right, let's take another question.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Next up, Shane Sowitz. Go ahead and unmute.
I haven't done baseball in a few years. I'm a softball guy. I used to do baseball out here. We still have the traditional DH where you can sub somebody in and out on defense and you can replace the DH and then re-enter the DH, correct?
Yes, absolutely. The traditional DH is what we're referring to that as, and that rule has not changed. It's the same as it has been for many years.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Next up, John Quick.
Hey guys, great presentation. Thanks for doing what you guys are doing. Appreciate all you guys. One thing I just want to bring up and clarify, and something maybe it's easier for regarding this courtesy runner, because this courtesy runner seems to be the most confusing thing that we come across with this PDH thing. One of the things you could do when you talk to your coach and your coach questions this is you separate the two. So if you have a PDH or a CDH, which is your pitcher DH or your catcher DH, all you have to do is tell the coach, Coach, you have elected to utilize this rule. The P part of it is defensive. The DH part of it is offense. So therefore, when this player bats, he is batting as a DH. Therefore, you revert back to your DH rule. That is where the courtesy runner is not allowed. And that's what you would tell the coach. That is just my thought.
That's a good explanation of it, John. I like it.
I like it a lot. That's that's perfect. Thanks for catching that and suggesting that, because anytime we can make it clear in any possible way, we like to do that. So excellent job on that, John.
And Albert Bugnall, I think you had your hand up. Did you have a question still?
I just was going back to what Casada was asking, and when we accept that substitution, and I believe it's when they're announced, not when they take their position in the field. So if that coach announces a courtesy runner for that player DH and he's an error, preventative umpiring would say we stop it before they make the error. However, if they continue, then we have to enforce whether it's an illegal substitution or a legal substitution, and they now lose their DH position.
I mean, I agree with you on that. And I would just use because the coach has the right to put on base anybody that is legal to be on the base, as a substitute. And if that eliminates the DH from the remainder of the game, because, for instance, it was, he wanted the courtesy runner, he wanted that person to run, it now becomes a pinch runner and it's a substitute. And advise the coach that is in fact a substitution and there's no more DH for the duration of the game.
Correct, and that's where the preventive umpiring part comes in.
Agreed.
That's over.
Who's the runner?
Dwayne Greco, you had your hand up. Did you mean to put it down or did you get your question answered? Dwayne? Dwayne, are you
Hey
still?
guys, can I talk about something real quick with you, Jay and Tom?
I have a
Oh,
bad
let me get
connection.
Dwayne's question,
I have a
and
bad
then we'll get to you, Dave.
connection.
We lost one.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're in and out.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Go
No.
put your microphone.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
You can type it in too, Dwayne, if you
Can
want.
you hear me?
Yes,
No, go ahead.
okay. You can type it in if you want, Dwayne, if that'll be easier. Okay, David Crawford, go ahead and unmute.
Hey, how's it going, Jay and Tom?
Hey, pretty good, David.
I just I'm having a hard time with one part of this rule, and I really feel like it needs to be rewritten. But So we're saying that in the 6th inning, the DH gets on base, they pitch run, it's a tie game. And then once they pinch run because he's subbing on offense for the DH, then we go back to a straight 9. And but because of this reentry rule, this is what I can't get my head over, we're going to allow this DH to re-enter in that same spot. The pinch runner's in now in the lineup with a 9-man card. And I feel like it defeats the purpose of killing the DH because you put that guy in there.
He can come back in there, but it is a straight 9. He's no longer a DH. He's whatever defense.
He's just a player now in the straight 9.
Yes.
But my whole concept of the rule is like you're losing that DH because of that matter. But the way this rule's written, you can still put your power hitter back in to that same spot after going to a straight 9. And I feel like it's like defeating the purpose, or I just don't see how the rule's written right that way.
Well, they didn't change any of the re-entry eligibility things. It's just that all starters can re-enter one time. And that's where, you've got the rule right based on what my understanding of what you were saying. And, maybe it does defeat the purpose of allowing, somebody to come back in and hit when they've been removed from the game, because of a substitution, but all starters in high school baseball are allowed to re-enter one time. And so that part has not been affected by this rule.
And I understand that. I'm just saying it's hard for me to come to grips with that, Tom. Like,
no. Hey, me too, David. No doubt about it. I think these guys did not think this through completely. I mean, their intent was good. Their intent was good. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think they were really thinking about the changes in the subs and how it affects things. So I agree with you.
They can really affect it.
And don't be surprised if halfway during the season something comes up on a clarification on exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about, guys. Thanks, man, and great presentation tonight.
Hey, thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. Okay, so I'm going to read Dwayne's chat here.
Hear me?
So
Yep.
it's more of a comment for everyone to be more diligent. Following Big John's comment, if the team does use the PDH, we need to be more diligent on offensive substitutions using the lineup card when that team is batting and clarifying with the coach before making the change.
That's right. You hit the nail on the head there. Exactly. Because I've been as guilty of it as some, as like you get in one of these games where the coach starts running substitutes in there and I'll catch up at the end of the inning, and we can't do that on offense anymore if the player DH rule is being employed. It's just, you are absolutely right on that. We have to and come up with some sort of shorthand so you don't have to write out Wojciechowski on the lineup card if that's the kid's name. It's like you get a 10-letter last name like Litchfield or something, it'll take you too long to put it on the lineup card. So come up with some sort of shorthand. Jersey numbers are good. My ABC technique works for me. So find some way to essentially still annotate your lineup card efficiently and quickly.
Sure. And I had one little clarification about the Wojciechowski comment. That guy was a detective in a TV show that was like 75 years ago, Tom. So is that really what your intent was, to use an example from a TV show 75 years ago?
No, you played junior high school baseball.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. All right. Never mind. Okay, sounds good. All right. I had to get on him on that. Oh, it's okay. Yeah. No, but can anybody come up with a Wojciechowski? I swear he was on a TV detective show at least 20 years ago.
Hill Street Blues. You can hear me. Hill Street Blues.
Oh, yes, indeed. Thank you. Damn. Oh, right.
Dwayne, you win the
Nice.
prize. I don't know what it
Yeah.
is yet, but you win
Yeah.
something.
That was excellent. Thank you.
That's hilarious.
Any more questions out there?
Does anybody have any other questions? If so, feel free to raise your hand, put it in the chat, unmute. It seems like the flurry of questions are over.
What's Christina got?
Thank you, guys. Drew said, "You're killing me, Jay."
Is that Drew Fountain?
Dana, for those that are on, we may just want to clarify the pitcher DH instead of a player DH, because my understanding is if it's a pitcher DH, we can still courtesy run, correct?
No,
You cannot do that.
you cannot do that. That's an
Not
offensive.
anymore.
No. That's where they're gonna try to do that, use that courtesy runner is on the, if it's a pitcher DH. And the guy, well, hey, the coach is gonna say, that's my pitcher. And like John said, he says, no, that's your DH. And you can't courtesy run for the DH.
Okay, so that's going to be a substitution at that point then.
Yes, it is.
It will be. It will be. Also, guys, I don't know if you've got the DH card. I don't know if you can see it. Where is the
We don't
camera?
have our video on.
Oh, okay, sounds good. Hey, anyway,
He is holding one, trust me.
yeah. So no, it's that plastic foldable player DH that I think Tom came up with. It's really going to come in handy. You got to stuff this in your pocket. There's almost every single scenario that could come up on your lineup card with the player DH. I mean, plus it's got the traditional DH cheat sheet. It's got the player DH and obviously some straight nine, but you don't need any help with the straight nine. But this cheat sheet is going to be critical for you guys. And take the time to get it out. If you're confused, get it out of your pocket. Open it up and take a look at it. I mean, we've always been told, oh, never take a rule book out in the field, never open, notes, make it look like, you know what you're talking about. Bullshit. Get this thing out. Get this thing out right now and try to figure it out. Okay. Every scenario is on the, I keep leaning this thing over thinking it's on video, but it's not. But anyway, get that cheat sheet in your pocket, take it out with you every time. Hey, base guy, you want to take it out there too? Fine. Okay. Brandon, I know I told you not to get your lineup card, but hey, this cheat sheet needs to be with you at all times. It really does. It's going to help you a lot.
And if you want a copy of that, we did send it out after the state clinic, but I can't remember who I sent it out to. So I don't remember if it was just people who had attended state. If you want a copy of that, Tom has sent it to me. Just send me an email and I will send it to you. So don't tell me in the chat because I'll forget. Oh, wait, there's something up here.
Can your mass email that you send out for these things, could you use that same list?
Oh, yeah.
Send the lineup card,
Yeah.
send the DH card to everybody.
Yeah, definitely. So Tom just asked if I would just send it to everybody on the baseball distribution list, and I will absolutely do that. For
So-
only
Dana?
$1 an email. No, I'm just kidding.
Really quick, and forgive me, my California education is failing me right now. But Colorado is right next to you guys, correct?
Right above us.
Right above you. Okay. Fair warning, Colorado is one of 3 states that does allow a courtesy runner for a pitcher and catcher DH.
Why are they doing that? How are they getting away with that?
Because the federation allows states to do certain things with rules as long as it doesn't drastically change the rule. So like courtesy runners, the speed up rule, it's not actually a listed rule. Under running, the mercy rules are not, they're additional rules that the state can adopt. Federation has allowed Hawaii, my own state of Washington, and the state of Colorado to do a courtesy runner for the pitcher DH, catcher DH. So if you guys have any crossover, be prepared for that.
Okay,
Yeah, sounds good.
That's good info.
Thank you for the heads up.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you. Appreciate
Because
that.
we do occasionally see teams from Colorado, especially in some of the summer league stuff that plays under high school rules. So we will see that, and I appreciate you letting us know.
And that's probably, Eric, that's probably good information for in regular years when our schools are playing at the same time as Colorado. If our schools go to Colorado, that's good. If they come here, they have to play under our rules. But if our schools go there, they would have to play under Colorado rules. So that's good info.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we run into the same thing where I'm at with the state of Oregon, who doesn't use a courtesy runner at all. So there's crossover confusion for us as well.
That is confusing. I mean, this is confusing as it is. Why would you have any more variations than possible? Goodness gracious.
Well, I know each state has, their own, they can do their own, like game ending procedures, but I mean, that's
They can do their own speed up rule. It's a speed up rule that's, it's not one of the.
And speed ups, I guess, but I don't know. It just seems a little odd that we're deviating from, the NFHS national mandate, but I mean, hey, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but I mean, hey, thanks for the heads up.
And thanks for continuing to join us from Washington, Eric. We appreciate that. That's awesome.
Sure.
I'm just happy you guys are still on right now. I was worried that you guys weren't going to be.
No, we're still going. And we'll send you'll get a copy of the recording tomorrow too, so you can watch what you missed.
Yeah.
If you want. It's good stuff.
And I will, if I can find it, I will try and find a copy of our instructions for courtesy runners and the pitcher DH, catcher DH, and try and shoot that off to you, Dana, if I can find it.
Okay, sounds good.
You guys have that.
Cool.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hey, Dana, going off of Eric talking about California, does New Mexico require helmets on coaches?
Only at Isotopes Park.
Oh, there you go. Only at Isotopes Park.
So they don't. And so, but I mean, I've seen the high school, first base coaches and third base coaches wear helmets, but I've also seen 7 times out of 10, they don't. And I don't believe they're required. They're not required to wear them.
The only caveat to that is non-adult base coaches do need to wear helmets, but other than that, no, except in certain venues.
California, everybody has to wear them. If you come in, you have to wear them.
And that would be something that the teams would be very aware of when they're playing in California, and they would suit up with a helmet, just because that's required.
It was funny. I had teams from Oregon and stuff come down for tournaments, and it was hard.
Sure.
Thanks, Shane.
Yep.
And Robert,
Oregon and Washington don't require it.
it's funny how we have a national federation, but everybody's kind of doing their own thing anyway. And Robert Parcells, I just saw your note about Antonito coming down to New Mexico. They would play under our rules here, so it would only be in the opposite direction if any of our schools went to play Antonito, that they would have to have that variation. You come to our home, you play by our rules.
Yeah.
And if I may just jump in here, I think one of the things to remember too is with this new PDH rule, we have yet to have a full season with it. So I think all of us as umpires, we need to really have our patience and be understanding with these coaches. If they do make a mistake on that lineup, just double checking, triple checking, coach, are you sure you want to make this move in this fashion? And, until they get used to the rule, we just have to be the one to say, are you sure you want to make this move? This is what's going to happen if you make this move.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% on that. And let's work with them as much as we possibly can. And, let's try not to be, rule bookers out there, black and white guys out there. I mean, hey, we're all human beings, we're all citizens out there. We need to get along together out there. And yeah, that's a great suggestion. And, just give them the option. Hey, so listen, here's what's going to happen if you do this. And you got to know what will happen. You got to know as an umpire, what will happen if he does that. So be prepared to handle that.
And then be prepared to explain it to the opposing coach.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Because some coach may, have a different understanding of the rule or something like that. And so you may have to explain not only the ramifications of a particular substitution or not to one coach, you might have to explain what happened to the other.
All right, everybody. Any other questions for Tom and Jay before they ride off into the sunset for the evening? Or I guess the sun already set, the moonlight. Well, Jay and Tom, thank you so much for doing this and
No
clarifying everything, because I know there are a lot of questions after state.
Yes.
We'll be sending this link out tomorrow, so you can always go back and review it should you want to look back at something, because it is a lot of information. But we do appreciate your attendance and your attention this evening. And guys, thanks again for doing this. And we'll keep you posted as the next baseball stuff is coming around the bend. So everybody have a great rest of your night, and we will talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you. Hill Street Blues. That was a good answer.
There you go.
That was gonna bother me. The second he said Wojciechowski, I mean, that triggered something in my mind, because I love